Today, it is time to talk about somebody I would consider a Zealandism protagonist, somebody that I would consider a lifeblood of this particular channel, somebody that definitely seems to live a life that would motivate making a bunch of videos about this person. This one in particular has a rather ridiculous headline. The type of headline that when you first read it, you go, what? Like when you first read the headline, you're completely dumbfounded to the point that you probably don't even believe that what the headline is saying is actually real. You know, it's one like you look at it and you're just like, there's no way. Like, there is no way that that's true, you know. But it is. But it actually is, because we have swan dived into this and there is stuff to uncover. This is the headline. You ready? Click the seatbelt in. Nottingham Forest and Olympiacos owner Marinakis prosecuted for a case involving murder of a police officer. Hello. That's notable. That's interesting. Now the article's in Greek, so I've taken the liberty to Google translate this bad boy myself. And let me tell you, he did not actually murder a police officer, which obviously is an incredibly sad event and thing that happened. But what he is being prosecuted for, what charges have kind of been brought up on, is involvement in leadership of the group that did, which is very mafia-esque, right? And that is the impression that we've gotten about this guy when he's been talked about before, right? We made a whole other Zealandism that kind of defended this guy, right? Because at the time, it was being reported that he's involved in this huge legal case, right, where it has to do with people trying to slander him and defame him and people running these massive smear campaigns against him. Owners of other clubs in Greece, by the way. So it's not like any hand is clean in this scenario, but they're flying planes over Nottingham Forest Stadium. They're driving vans with big signs on the side about Marinakis being corrupt and this and that around Nottingham, right? They're hiring global marketing companies to try and steer online, but a bunch of Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts that are allegedly fan run, that want Marinakis out of Nottingham Forest. And of course, the backdrop to this is that Nottingham Forest is doing really well. Nottingham Forest has gone from a team that was nearly running afoul of FFP and nearly relegated to a team that's competing for European places, very legitimately, inspired by my boy, the Kiwi, Chris Wood. And now all of a sudden you've got their owner being brought up as part of a murder there are a lot of investigations to get brought up on, right? You could be breaking financial rules in the league. You could be avoiding taxes. You could be all sorts of things that these sorts of offensively rich people are able to, they get brought up on these charges and it's like, right, so what? No, probably nothing's going to happen, and you just see these types of headlines, and then you kind of move on with your day. But anytime you see the charges and you're like, oh, it's a murder investigate, that changes things, right? Because murder is like sin numero uno, okay? And now you're basically the mafia boss in this situation, according to this article, right? This is liberal. Right here it's a news outlet in Greece, and that's what I've translated. And it's not just Vangelis Marinakis. It is also the vice president of Olympiacos, which is, of course, also a club that Marinakis owns, as you would have figured out from me reading you the title. And that would be Kostas Karapapas. So names check out as owners of a Greek club. Right, and this is the case of the murder of Georgios Ligeridis, the policeman who it was basically a naval flare incident, a flare-based incident. But this incident, apparently, I didn't hear about this at the time. This is the first time I'm hearing about this particular incident. Apparently, it had to do, this article's making it seem with the Olympiacos fan group. Apparently, this had to do with the Olympiacos fan group, because that would be Theros 7, the Association of Organized Fans of Olympiacos, which have already been judged as the defendants in this case. So that, to me, makes it clear that the Olympiacos fan group was involved and kind of is being prosecuted for being legally responsible for the death of this police officer having to do with flares. And that makes sense. If there's one thing that kind of like Eastern Balkan Europe can do, it's get a bunch of flares going at the match, right? In Greek fan culture really is derived from that. It looks and sounds similar. Not that I've ever been to a match in Greece myself, but having watched them on TV and stuff, it gives off that same sort of vibe. And there's definitely not a shortage of, naval flares that might be involved in some sort of incident like this. But apparently the people that are actually doing the prosecuting, like the legal authorities, a guy named Mr. Guvas, is investigating the unseen leadership of the criminal organization. And based off of the charges that are being brought against Marinakis and Karapapas, they're basically the unseen leadership. At least that's the authorities believe they are the unseen leadership of a criminal organization here. The charges, the offenses prosecuted are financing of a criminal organization and the incitement of sporting violence. Those are the charges that are actually being brought. So there is not a direct, at least based off of this translated version, a direct relationship with like Marinakis is being charged as an accomplice to murder, right? This is where you're trying to pick people off with secondary charges because of their involvement in creating the atmosphere that then led to the murder. That's my understanding of it. So incitement of sporting violence and financing of a criminal organization, which of course is referring to now the fan group of Olympiacos, Theros 7, as a criminal organization, which I would imagine that fan group might have an issue or two with. As you probably discern from the way I'm reading this article, they'd already produced the charges for kind of all of the involved people. They arrested, it says 167 people and 25 were remanded into custody for the actual violence that occurred. And then as the investigation continued, they're making it sound like they've been able to uncover more involvement from Marinakis. And I can't help but while I'm reading this and while we're learning about this together here, I can't help but think back to that first video I made about one of the other owners in Greece trying to slander this guy every day and twice on Sunday. And then thinking, it is hard to find somebody that owns a club that has like that much money and owns a club that their nose is entirely clean of some type of scandal. And honestly, it's hard to find somebody in the world whose nose is entirely clean from some type of scandalous thing they've done in their past. But it seems clear to me that Marinakis has at least cultivated a reputation as somebody that continuously finds himself involved in these kinds of glancing blows of unsavory things. Like, the fan group had a big fracas with the police. This guy died. And now it turns out Marinakis might have had a bit more involvement with that fan group than he initially was letting on. Let's get to the statement so you can then draw your conclusions from that. This is the statement from the authorities. However, from the detailed examination and assessment of the collected evidence, it emerges that apart from the obvious leadership, like the obvious stated leadership of the group, it cannot be ruled out that the criminal organization is directed covertly and at the highest level by members of management or executives of Olympiacos and the sports association with the name Olympic Association of Philithlon Piraeus. Without their participation and high protection, the leading members of the criminal organization would not have the universal and unquestioning acceptance and obedience of the lower members, and consequently, the criminal organization would not exist. Otherwise, it would have a very limited scope in action. There is another interpretation of this, which is essentially some sort of administrative negligence, basically saying that Marinakis has not done enough to try and control, to try and manage this unruly, over-the-top fan group. And as a result, then you are liable for allowing this fan group to exist, and you are liable for the damage that this fan group hath wrought, which, very significant damage we're talking about here. We're talking about a dude that literally died. So this isn't like somebody just destroyed a few shop windows or threw some patio furniture around in a public square here. We're talking about life and death and the fact that, the fans of Olympiacos were, it seems, pretty clearly involved in that. But as good as Marinakis has been as the owner of Nottingham Forest, this is the latest in a long line of interesting and unsavory things that he's apparently been caught up in, and whether it is administrative negligence or there's some sort of behind the scenes shadow government of this fan organization that's, kind of turns them into the military arm of Olympiacos that Marinakis can kind of use as is sort of being alleged here. We'll find out in court. But, the owner of Nottingham Forest and Olympiacos is now going to be headed to court once again, this time to try and defend himself from being somehow involved in the murder of a police officer. And, that's just certainly one of the sentences of all time. Just felt like everybody should know that was happening. Just feel like it's relevant information to have in the public. Okay, bye.